Hello, everyone, and welcome. Our first speaker today is Jean-Sébastien Simon. His presentation will be on transforming society from the inside out, the case for conscious business education. Jean-Sébastien is a lecturer in sustainability at ESSEC Business School. He has taught leadership, management, and soft skills for over a decade, in addition to coaching, advising, and training leaders committed to having a positive impact on business and society. He's also facilitated training and coaching sessions in leadership, management, negotiation, and conflict resolution for participants of the public sector and the private sector and nonprofits internationally. He's created and taught the Conscious Business course at ESSEC and the Productive Behaviors Workshop, and he graduated with a BBA from ESSEC and has studied for an MA in East-West Psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies, CIIS, otherwise known. He is a certified integral associate coach. In his free time, he loves to read, write, teach, and learn, sing and dance, spending time in nature, and cultivating inner and outer peace. And we're really happy to welcome you. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. First, I'd like to thank the CIIS for organizing this conference, and thank you so much to Professor Debashish Banerjee for inviting me and accepting my proposal. And thank you also to Jonathan Kay and the whole organizing team and our moderator today for introducing me and giving me the floor. So I'll share my screen and we can begin. So transforming society from the inside out, the case for conscious business education. So the idea is that right now we are living in a period of crisis in our world. As the mother expressed it, the men of finance and the businessmen have been offered the possibility to collaborate with the future. But most of them refuse, convinced that money is stronger than the future. So she told them, she said directly, you have been offered the possibility of collaborating with the future, but you have thought that the power of money is stronger than that of the future. So in my presentation, I'll discuss several aspects related to the situation. So first, I'll give a brief contextual background for the emergence of conscious business. Then I'll give an overview of conscious business, and I'll try not to use too much of business lingo for those who are not familiar with the business world. And then I'll talk more about conscious business education and its impact that I've seen on students at the ESSEC Business School. And then I'll go over the other applications that conscious business can have in other communities. So I won't repeat. You all know the threshold that we're all crossing as humanity, with social unrest, geopolitical unrest, nuclear threats, the rise of technologies that menace our existence and threaten our species, survival, economic crashes, and mental breakdown for a lot of human beings on planet Earth. So we won't go into more detail. You all know the situation. The business world has tried to address the crisis, or at least some people in the business world. They use a way of dealing things. When they identify a problem, they try to identify solutions. Okay. One of these solutions has been the model called the triple bottom line model that is used in sustainability. I will call it the TBL for brevity. And you all know that it's basically focusing on the planet, the people, in addition to trying to make a profit. Okay. This rise of the TBL model has given birth to many new frameworks, many certifications, in order to try to be more sustainable. Okay, so businesses have developed all these acronyms, ESG, GRI, IFRS, like accounting norms, etc., and so forth. But it doesn't seem like it has brought the appropriate results, or at least the results are not sufficient compared to the magnitude of the crisis. So the question we can ask is maybe we need a more comprehensive overview and better leadership instead of just making up new standards and norms. So the limitations of this approach to sustainability can be summarized and have been summarized by three main thinkers, okay? And as you can see, I'll just read Haridas Chowdhury, the founder of CIS, way of explaining it, although he was not specifically referring to the problems of the business world. The problems that we see today, the problems of division and separation, the problems of conflict and crisis, are ultimately traceable to the level of consciousness on which we're functioning now. That is the mental level, okay? So that echoes what Buckminster Fuller said, as well as Albert Einstein. So there's a call for further evolution of business. If we look at the way that business has evolved, that has been summarized in the work by Frédéric Laloux in his book, Reinventing Organizations. He basically uses Ken Wilber's integral theory and developmental framework based on other integral thinkers to explain that the classic business basically operates at what he calls the orange level, which is the modern way of thinking, okay, based on meritocracy, progress, and which is results driven. Sustainable business, there's a bit of evolution of consciousness since it takes into account more stakeholders and social aspects as well as nature and the planet, okay? But what's really missing to become more conscious business is taking into account the inner world of the psyche, okay? And there, Frédéric Laloux talks about organizations, which he calls teal organizations, which are basically designed to allow employees and stakeholders to experience wholeness at work, okay? So it's based on self-management, and it's also designed to serve an evolutionary purpose, okay? So here, that's what we'll be looking at when we talk about conscious business. Now I'm going to give you a brief overview of conscious business, and first I'll start by describing what other thinkers have said about the topic. So if we look at the roots of conscious business, if it goes all the way back to integral pioneers, basically the first, thinkers who talked about integral thinking. So here, obviously, we have Aurobindo, among others, including Rudolf Steiner, Teilhard de Chardin, Jean Gebser, and Haridas Chowdhury. Then there's what I call second-generation integral thinkers. Okay, and here I would look at thinkers who have used integral theory and brought it further starting in the middle of the 20th century and late 20th century. So Ken Wilber, Jorge Ferrer, and Professor Debashish Banerjee as well. I've only mentioned these three main thinkers since they're the ones who had the most influence on my framework, but obviously there are other integral thinkers, okay? And what's interesting is that based on the work of these thinkers, other thinkers have applied to specific fields integral theory. And here, to the field of business, we can talk about Fred Kaufman, Frédéric Laloux, and Raj Sisodia, for example. So these are the ones that have been the most influential for my understanding of conscious business. And they're the most prominent figure in the conscious business movement. So Ken Wilber gives a compelling definition of conscious business. He explains that it is business that takes into account body, mind, spirit in self, culture, and nature. And thus, integral business leadership would necessarily use tools that have been developed to best know and master oneself, culture, and world. Okay. So based on this work, I tried to basically put together and piece together the different frameworks of different authors and add what was missing in traditional approaches to sustainability. So that's why I developed a framework for conscious business, which I propose. So instead of just a triple bottom line with 3 dimensions, I propose to add 4 more dimensions. We see that we keep the 3 dimensions, expanding or transforming just the search for profit into an aspiration for prosperity, which is more all-encompassing. We put purpose at the core of conscious business. So purpose, in Sanskrit parlance, it could be swadharma, whether for an organization as a collective entity or for an individual. We add progress and processes. They were more or less implicit in the triple bottom line model, but I think it's important to make them explicit. But the most important addition is the integration of the psyche, the inner being, and psychology. So adding depth, adding emotions, adding the inner worlds of human beings, because that's where we find the unconscious forces that create the problems in the first place, and that's where the healing can take place. So now, how do we apply this to conscious business education? Okay, because to transform the business world, yes, we can train managers and leaders, and that has a direct impact on the business world. But the trees of tomorrow are planted with the seeds of today, and these are the business students, basically. So basically, we see that, as Haridas Chaudhary pointed out, there is a discontent in modern youth. Okay. It's an expression of disenchantment with established educational systems, with their overemphasis upon intellectual, vocational, and technological values. Okay. So here, Haridas Chaudhary calls really for the flowering of a holistic urge inherent in life. So that's really what a conscious business education is, and I believe should be founded upon. So in the traditional paradigm of education and business education, basically the curriculum is based around functional disciplines. In the context of business, business students are taught marketing, are taught accounting, international trade, and so on and so forth, and sales. Then they spring the committees who design the curriculum add on communication skills, teamwork, job-oriented skills. And then on top of that, if there's a bit of extra time in the curriculum, then they add a bit of leadership, sustainability, and ethics. So we see that sustainability and ethics are peripheral to the functional discipline, which appear as the core. And this is problematic, highly problematic, because we see the kind of business world that this creates. Okay, it's an outside-in approach, basically, because it's guided by external forces. A shift needs to happen, okay, if we want to change business education. And that's shifting to placing being and becoming at the center of the curriculum, okay. So first, start by the personal development and conscious leadership of business leaders, okay, being and becoming. And then around that, based on who they are and their aspirations, then add on holistic and sustainable functional disciplines. And then finally, once they know from the inside out who they are and how they can apply these their way of being to specific skills, then they can deploy this into projects, job-oriented skills through teamwork. Okay, so that's basically putting Swadharma and maybe giving the opportunity for the psychic being to bloom at the core of the curriculum. So that's what I tried to do when I put together the syllabus for the course of conscious business when I started it in 2018. So this relates a lot to Sri Aurobindo's 4 principles of teaching. Okay, so the teacher should not teach the student, but rather should help the student teach himself. He should be concerned not with what the students remember, but what he understands. He should find out if the student is interested in the subject and not create the interest, and if not, create the interest. And finally, he should build the proper environment of learning. Okay. Several authors have described integral education, and throughout my research, I found that unknowingly at the time I built the syllabus, but that the conscious business education does resonate with most of these approaches, if not all of them. Okay, so here I cite various authors who highlight different aspects, but all of them are important. Okay. So now I'll talk more about the impacts of this framework with the 7 P's of conscious business on business students. And I use the term impact, which is not necessarily very much used at CIS, but in the business world, we talk about impact a lot of time, most of the time. And my laboratory of experimentation has been ESSEC Business School. That was the business school I graduated from, and I've been teaching there for more than a decade. I'll give you a brief overview just for those who don't know the business school. It's a business school located northwest of Paris. It's got also a campus in Paris, a campus in Singapore, and one in Rabat in Morocco. It's got almost 7,400 students in undergraduate and graduate programs and full-time programs. And yeah, it has a significant impact in the world. So I find that interesting to see that such a mainstream business school is open to holistic teaching. And I've heard more and more professors and teachers talking about holistic education. And I even heard a professor last week talk about helping students spiritually also, which I had not heard. And when I was a student there more than a decade ago, we did not talk about holistic education. So I see an evolution in consciousness in the world of business. So some of the impacts that I've noticed based on what the students shared in their final reflection papers. These are some of the impacts that are more than have been seen across multiple students. Broadening of awareness, motivation, increased peace, well-being, and a sense of hope. So the more this course, which is taught at the bachelor's in the bachelor's program, has received really excellent ratings by the students, which is encouraging, and the class usually fills up. So that's encouraging to show that students are interested in consciousness, including students who are initially skeptical. And at the end of the class, they say that they didn't expect that, and they were positively affected by the course. So I've shared a few quotes by students. I had permission to share these. So despite the appreciation for the course, what's really interesting is, for example, what the student Angelica Deralda shared. She shared that during COVID, and she said that the class has been a light in the darkness of time. So when students connect to their inner depth, they really see the meaning and the value despite challenging circumstances, because the world might become more challenging in the years and decades to come. So that's one of the key purposes of this course. But this framework of conscious business can have an impact beyond business schools, obviously, so businesses, obviously, but integral communities such as Aurobindo, institutions, governments, and nonprofits. Okay, conscious business doesn't have to be reduced to the business world, but the framework can be helpful elsewhere. And here, I won't go into detail, but these are some of the topics when we go in depth into the 7 Ps. These are some of the topics that I cover in my classes and in my work and research. And these are some things that can be helpful for communities. I'm thinking in particular for processes, for example, for communities such as Aurobindo, looking at which decision processes can help to move forward. Or if we look at psyche and leadership, how can conflict resolution help parties which have challenges and conflicts? Also regarding prosperity, I know that in Aurobindo, money is a big issue. So how can we make sure that prosperity is created beyond just the focus on money or profits, but how do we create sustainable prosperity so it doesn't become a shadow or a challenge for the community? So to conclude, the worldview of business is evolving towards more consciousness, I believe, based on my observations. Conscious business education is a transformative approach that can support business leaders by growing into relevant ways of being in the world. Conscious business education has shown it can shed light on higher ideals and aspirations to business students and leaders, designed to find meaning and experience wholeness in life. And finally, it also has the potential to bring tools, frameworks, and transformational practices to various organizations, including integral communities such as Aurobindo, to grow and evolve in harmony and balance. Yeah, if you're interested in references, please feel free to contact me. I can send you all the documents. And I'd like to thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to open for questions and discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean-Sébastien. Yeah, I think we'll go with raising hands.
And
Yeah.
the question and answer is open for our attendees online. And we don't have anything as of now, but please send in a question. And yeah, otherwise we can open it to the panel here for discussion.
Thank you, Jean-Sébastien. That was very nice and great to hear from you. I think it's very interesting. I wanted to draw attention to the fact that when we're talking about contemplative civilization related to communities and to sustainability, I think what you brought out with regard to intentional communities like Aurobindo opens up the possibility of initiating communities of that kind, economically speaking, because I think that's a really key factor. Aurobindo was put together through the intention of people who came already into a space, but they're also trying to sustain themselves and create a sustainable civilization at the same time. But outside of Aurobindo, where we don't have that kind of an existing space and people have intentions, they get together, they get inspired, they want to do something, but where the rubber hits the road, it's really a question of how can they survive as a community. So is it possible to envisage training programs for those kinds of groups, as you're saying, that work from Swadharma out, that contact their inner. So it's basically a pedagogical, method that ultimately is related to the generation of, of business and money to sustain oneself and sustain the community and the world. So can you speak a little bit more about that, and if you've done any work of that kind?
Thank you so much, Debashish. Yes, this is a very critical point, and I've noticed with many intentional communities that I've visited over the years, that often they have very good intentions, but sometimes the money skills and the business skills are what are missing. And also there can be a lot of shadow or fear around like money, and also a radical rejection of capitalism, which is founded on legitimate reasons. So they are definitely some very basic skills that we can teach communities on how to manage money properly, how to create services, programs, how to manage a budget, and so on and so forth. And I've unfortunately seen, I have a friend who wanted to create a community, but because it was not financially sustainable, it had to shut down. And that is the case in many communities. That happens also in the sector of nonprofits that are not financially sustainable. And unfortunately, some positive impact cannot happen in the world because it doesn't have the solid foundation. So yes, the programs definitely can be developed. And yes, I have worked with a few nonprofits to help them on these aspects. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Debashish.
Thank you.
We have some questions from the online participants. The first question is, are there any companies who have embraced conscious business practices? And if so, what has been their biggest challenge?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So in his book, Reinventing Organizations, Frédéric Laloux gives case studies of companies which have implemented conscious business practices. There's also several case studies in Mackie and Sisodia's book, Conscious Capitalism. So if you want several references, you can look at these. And they have embraced, they have implemented practices, whether for decision-making, whether for, all aspects of a company. And I think some of their biggest challenges, that's a good question. Well, I would say it depends on where the initiative comes from. If the initiative is a grassroots movement within the organization, the problem comes when a group of employees are more, let's say, more conscious than the top management. and the top management is sort of holding on or resisting to the change. So in that case, if you're in an organization, you can always create change at your own level if you're not in the top management. But for the whole organization to become more conscious and to set up the proper processes and to change governance and so on, you do need the buy-in from the leadership. But there's been also challenges for companies where the leadership wants to implement the change because sometimes some of the employees create resistance. So in that case, often what happens is that once the top management is really making the change, then they let people know that the company is evolving and that the old way of doing things based on control and coercion will no longer be possible. So what they did in a French company called Favi is that they offered the possibility for direct line supervisors either to train to become coaches and to support the workers, or to get a package and then be dismissed from the company if they did not want to change, and then they could find another company where they could they could keep their old ways. So that can also be challenging. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question is from Patrick Baldillo. He says, I wonder if the integral as understood by Wilbur and the difference as understood by Sri Aurobindo can be talked about, here as this impacts a vision of business for the future.
Good question. I don't know. The difference as understood. I'm not really sure. Could you maybe expand on what you mean by the difference as understood by Sri Aurobindo? I'm not really sure I see the distinction clearly between Wilbur's integral and Sri Aurobindo's difference.
Okay, yeah, we'll let Patrick type something in there.
Okay, thank you.
The next question, and we'll come back to that one. So Serena asks, can you share more about how business students who have taken your conscious business course have positively impacted the businesses, organizations, and communities they go on to work for?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I'd love to have an answer. I would say, I don't know. I can give you some examples, but I would need to follow up, and maybe there would be some research that would need to be done for students who took the course in 2018. So some of the first students, and see where they're working now and how it has impacted them. I know that some of them have made choices of more conscious companies that they would not have made without the courses. I remember a student from Brazil sending me an email months later saying that he got an internship in a certain company, and he said that he would not have thought about this company had he not taken the class. I know another student who studied for a master's in transpersonal psychology at Aleph, and she did this master's thanks to the course of conscious business, and now she organizes retreats. So I know that she's impacting positively the people at the retreats in an eco retreat center that she organizes. And I also know that some other students, they've taken mainstream positions in mainstream companies, but I think that on the long term they might have shifts in career. But just when you have a student loan, and there are economic realities where sometimes you just go for the first job, and I tell my students it's okay. They don't have to put extra pressure on themselves to get to work in a conscious organization from the get-go. It's okay to get a couple years of experience first, and then move towards more conscious organization.
Thanks. One short question here from Chris. How important is scale to the CB model? And if you could remind us of the CB model too, what that is.
Yes. So the CB model, so the conscious business model, I'll just share my screen again. Just look for the right slide. I'll give the one with examples here. Okay. Yes. So I think, well, I believe that it can be applied to any scale of business, but obviously for a very small business, let's say For a solopreneur or 2 or 3 people, well, it's easier to implement, but obviously you might not need as much complexity and sophistication. However, I believe that if you set up your business properly, let's say for a startup, it's healthy to think about all the dimensions from the get-go, instead of trying to build a business that is not built on solid foundations and then try to make it more conscious. For large businesses, however, it might be challenging because there's already a lot of inertia, a lot of tamas in the organization. And so if you haven't taken, let's say, the psyche into account and the depths, you'll need a lot of work to raise awareness around the depths, use several tools to grow the teams and to help them, such as with emotional intelligence, positive intelligence, conscious leadership, and other practices. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yes, and I'm just going to bring back Patrick here to clarify his question about Wilber and Sri Aurobindo's integral. Patrick says, Wilber understands integral as an additive venture, adding all the different levels of the being equals the integral, while Sri Aurobindo sees the integral as a plane of consciousness that is more than the sum of its parts, that knows the whole and the details simultaneously. This may be difficult to speak of here, but he's trying to clarify. So that's.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Yes, this clarifies, and now I understand better your question. Yes, well, here I would say that the model that I present is still quite mind-based. Well, first of all, it's helpful for myself, at my stage of growth, in my stage of evolution, and it's deeply helpful for business students, because I see that for business students, it is already a huge leap to think in these terms. I haven't explained it in the model, but basically each dimension is holographic, and so it contains all the other dimensions. So the psyche contains the 7 dimensions, the people contains the 7 dimensions, and so on. When I try to explain that to business students, it's already a level of abstraction that most of them cannot comprehend. So I try to keep things as simple as possible, and I would say that it is still a mental model, and most of the business leaders it's already progress to use Wilber's additive model. And yeah, hopefully if some business leaders evolve their consciousness to the point where they can grasp it in an integral way from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, that would be fantastic. But I'm starting at where I'm at and where most people are. Yeah.